faces, Lord, they hate to hear your message. Though I'm geared with your protection, your armor that I've been blessed with, no stressing. When I'm trying to teach them all your lessons, they looking at me crazy like I got a weird perspective. Smeared faces, Lord, they hate to hear your message. Though I'm geared with your protection, your armor that I've been blessed with, no stressing. When I'm trying to teach them all your lessons, they looking at me crazy like I got a weird perspective.
All right, and so I got this amazing couple joining me today. The Warners, as I call them, because they won. We have Kinei,
yeah,
and Kyle, my main man Kyle.
Hey everybody.
It's been a blessing getting to know them, and it's been coming up on a year.
Wow.
Since
that's so weird.
it's
Wow.
time be flying, man. Time been
Truly.
flying, but you guys have been a blessing to be around and to get to
Likewise,
know
man.
and to watch, and your amazing children, and it's been great. And so I wanted you guys to come on the channel because you guys have been married for how long?
We're coming up on 10 years.
Coming up
in
on 10
January.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the end of
And
January.
you guys have a lot of wisdom and experience.
Oh, man.
I'm guessing and knowing.
I was about to say, I don't know about wisdom.
Look.
That's a work in progress.
Yeah. But thank you.
Yes, thanks.
But I'm going through this series. It's called The Myths of Marriage. We have a lot of people that have these different thoughts and ideas about what marriage is, and
Sure.
maybe it's gonna make me happy, and it's gonna give me everything I ever wanted, and it's gonna solve all my problems. And we know
Yeah.
that that's not true.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
not true. I
not
know
at
for
all.
a lot of guys, we'd be like, man, I'm gonna have sex as much as I want, and it's just gonna be there ready as soon as I get home, and I ain't gonna have to do nothing, and it's in house and blah blah blah. Nah, fam.
Yeah. Enter kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Even without kids, like, your wife's a human being, man. She got things that
Yeah.
she going through and things that she want to do, and some of those things don't involve your little narrow behind. So go sit down. So
That's so funny.
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
but we gonna talk about some of those ideas and thoughts. But before we get into that, I just want you guys to share a little bit about yourselves. Share your names or nicknames, and then a little bit about what you do as far as a career.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my name is Kyle Warner. Excited to be back on the podcast again. I'm 35, West Side resident, born in East Garfield Park, raised in Austin. Had a encounter with the Lord via evangelism and a really powerful Good Friday service when I was 20 years old, from a person who went to the high school I went to, John Marshall High School, who was living for the Lord then and would eventually lead me to Christ, and never looked back since that time, and have had such a desire to follow God with all of my heart and to live for him and to have other people experience that in a real way. And immediately when I got saved, I knew God had called me to be a pastor. And so I started pursuing that from day one. And so both my wife and I are pastors now. In terms of career, I am currently in school now. We're enrolled and be starting to fall for the master's program for clinical counseling. So going to be a licensed counselor, and feel like that is at the core of what it means to be a pastor, being able to provide that to both unbelievers and believers. And so really looking forward to that. My wife and I have 3 beautiful kids, and we're enjoying life, appreciative of life, and loving the Lord and loving one another along on this journey.
Hey everyone, again, my name is Kinei. So a little bit about me. I also grew up on the West Side in Garfield Park. I've lived in other West Side neighborhoods, but mostly there. And that is kind of the concentrated area where Kyle and I minister. We do a lot of community outreach. So our experience as pastors is very boots on the ground, which I love. That is kind of where our hearts connected, even, you could say. I've been walking with the Lord since I was 19. That's been a minute. I won't reveal my age like my husband did. But yeah, it's been a long journey and process for me, serving the Lord in our community, which has been a wonderful time of learning for me, of growing and maturity in my faith. Currently, I work at a private Christian school, doing social emotional learning skills with students in grades pre-K through eighth. So that's been quite a journey as well, but a great experience also. My eldest daughter, attends that school, so it's been great being close to her there as well. I would say one of the greatest connecting points for Kyle and I is that we live in the neighborhood where we serve.
Yeah.
That is one of our greatest passions as pastors. So looking forward to sharing and seeing what God has for us and what unfolds in our future together.
Absolutely.
Nice. How did you guys meet each other and eventually become married?
Well, that's a story.
Yeah. So we met in January of 2010 through a mutual friend. And from that initial connection, just always thought that Kinei was just this amazing person that I would want to know more about. And it's very interesting. Before anything started, I think we kind of started off as really cool acquaintances first, and then from
I
there,
don't know that it was that cool, but we can come back to that.
yeah. For me and my perspective, I thought that it was cool and acquaintances, and I use the word acquaintance because it was the step before really becoming a friend. And when I think about that, I think about the process that we've been in, right? And so see, I knew I was gonna win you over. So in that, I got a chance to really know her. So knowing her would be times of conversation in person and then times of conversating on the phone. I think at a time when people used to talk on the phone, which is probably non-existing now, but we would talk on the phone, and early on it was established that this isn't going to be anything sexual, and this isn't going to be anything that in any way is just going to be just gratifying to what we can get from one another, but this is more so, hey, this is me, and I really want to know you without any hidden agendas, without any motives or anything like that. And so we would have, deep conversations. We would have the whimsical conversations,
Yes.
but most importantly, it was always real. I believe the groundwork of how we were talking, and that wasn't anything I think at the time that I knew as much as I know now, but I was very intentional about establishing that because the relationships I had prior to that was, I mean, to be honest, it was like the end goal would be, okay, what sexual gratification can we get out of this? What kind of check off list of everything else that we've known, can we say, okay, we've done that? But this was different. This really required us to be transparent. This required us to be honest with one another. And then there was always that, I believe that measurement of what does this look like for this to be healthy, for this to be holy, and for this to be where, I mean, ultimately, like in our conversation, it's constantly something that's edifying and encouraging. And so, yeah, that was kind of what led. And so
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
How, as a young man, do you balance that? Was there an attraction there, or was it, how did you think through the process of, like, when I talk to her, I just want to get to know her for her.
Yeah.
And I'm not attracted to her at all. Like, I don't think she's cute. How did you as a young man think
bro,
through that?
That's a great question. So for me, when I was 5 years old, between 5 and 6, I knew that I wanted early on to be married. And my family, seeing different ones, eventually as we got older, having kids, and more times than not, having children, and people were not married. I knew that I didn't want that. That's even before I had a relationship with the Lord. I knew I didn't want that. And so I wanted something that was real, and I wanted something that I was seeing my mom come into when she married my dad when I was 9. That was a real critical time for me to see marriage early on like that and be impressionable, to say, hey, this is something that I wanted. So for me, I didn't know how to get all to the points of A, B, C, D, but I knew that the end goal needed to be marriage. And I knew that there were certain things that came with being married at a very early age, not mastering or not knowing everything, but there was something like marriage is a teamwork. Marriage is, these are two people coming together that build a family. And I knew that that was important. And so for me, I think at that time, and when I got saved, I said, okay, family is important before God. Family is something that I've experienced coming from a 2-parent home. Now with that, what do I do to get closer to that? And I think I realized that when I got saved, like, wait, we can't do this without God. So I need God to do that. And it wasn't perfect, right? I'll be honest. It was not perfect at all. But I think having that standard there, it always showed me, like, my eyes never left off the fact that I want a family and I know I can't get that without God. And I want to do this the right way because I don't want to end up like everyone else. And not that I'm better than everyone else, but all the more I'm more susceptible to being what other people around me are being. I don't want to be a statistic. I don't want to be another notch, on our, family history of, this is typically how guys go. Like, no, I want to be something different. And I want my kids to, eventually in the long term, to have a testimony to say, man, we was conceived through our mom and dad being married. We was conceived because my dad loved my mom and my mom loved my dad. And so that was that early on for me. So again, long story, knowing that God was the end result. And even though it was not perfect, I knew that I had to get close to him in order to have this.
Now, I don't know that I had the same kind of thoughts as my husband. At the time, I had a past, before walking with the Lord. So my experience with guys was very heavily and upfront sexual in nature. I was prepared to have those kind of conversations. I just felt like it's going to come up. Like, this is what guys like to talk about. And so I had kind of conformed my mindset to expecting that in any conversation with any guy that I talked to. So Kyle was a pleasant surprise in that matter. I think in one of our first conversations, he kind of said and knocked it out of the way. Like, most guys want to have a conversation with a woman about sex. I don't want to do that. There's a million other things we could talk about. And it kind of caught me off guard because I'm like, okay. What are we going to talk about? It ended up being dinosaurs, but hey, who cares? So it helped me to be much more at ease and comfortable and being myself and knowing like this guy doesn't expect anything from me. And so I was kind of, it almost set the tone for me to conform to what he was bringing. And that was also new for me. He was very mature, very much a gentleman. And all of these things stood out to me. But going back to what I said earlier about, I don't know how cool it was so strange to me to meet a guy who would come to my house, visit my family when I wasn't there, who would call me regularly, multiple times a week, just to see how I was doing. A couple of times on occasions, he would ask if he could pray for me, and it would lead into prayers about my family, deep things I hadn't revealed, to the point I would be weeping on the floor. And he would just go, "Oh, have a nice day." Click. And I'm like, where did he come from?
And this is before dating. This is just
just getting to know each other. This was like in the first year of meeting each other.
Yeah.
Sometimes some of those instances within the first few months. And so it was like a lot fast for me because I'm like, this is a whole other dude. I have a phrase that I included even in our vows when I first talked to Kyle. I said, "You are everything and nothing at all like what I expected." And so it became like a joke between us later, but he really was. I'm like, you are all the things that tick my boxes for a man, but you're also like, not like how, like, because I didn't expect anybody to do that. And so it showed me myself too and how I view men. And also how I viewed myself. I don't think I recognized that I had value and something to bring to the table until talking to a man who wanted something other than something sexual from me. And so that was, even meeting his family, getting to know each other's families. Kyle has said this before, but bringing me around his family, like just what a treasure that was, because that let me know, oh, I have worth. Like I have something precious, and there's something more to me than even what I saw myself. And I think that's what scared me and kind of put me off about him, because I'm like, this guy is coming strong and real, and I ain't used to that. And so it forced me to be my strong, real self, and kind of helped me to know that I could be with safety in a relationship with a male. And so that friendship was critical, because, you know, for me, I'm like, I've always done this, like, hey, over here for a guy, and I didn't have to do that for him. So it just kind of helped to put things in a much more new footing and perspective for me as a woman.
And so y'all met through friends, and then y'all became friends. In the time that y'all have known each other, did y'all date anybody else? Were y'all in a relationship with anybody else?
We were both in relationships. We were both in serious relationships too, that we both thought were going to lead to marriage. So
Did that break up, but the relationship end before you start popping up at her family's house?
Yeah. So yes, that right. That's
no, well, sort of.
Yeah.
Because
I would have had a problem with that.
that's so funny.
Yeah. Because see that as a point of conflict. Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting because a lot of this has to do with the dynamics of the fellowship we were in at that time. We were all friends, so it wasn't abnormal for any one of us to pop up at somebody's family's house. It's just that my grandma was the type of grandma like, no, I don't play that. Don't have people calling my house. Don't have people popping up. I don't want to be bothered with them. I don't know what's going on. But she made an exception for Kyle because he was such a standout guy. And so, you know, even though we would visit with each other frequently in those relationships that we had, I think that because that just wasn't on the radar for us with each other, we were, you know, focused on ministry, focused on these relationships we were in. There was never any inkling like that could be something if Kyle go visit her family. Like that's just something that he would do. And that was another reason I'm like, even though it's helping me see my own value, these are things he didn't know was going on. God was working something for me that he didn't realize at the time, because that's just who he was across the board. So we didn't date, to answer your question. We actually had a good, strong 5 years of friendship before the topic of marriage became a reality for us.
Yeah.
So it was legit friendship.
Legit.
Yeah. It was. Yeah. It was definitely legit.
During that friendship, was there flirting? Did you know Kyle liked you? Did you know that she liked you? Was there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There would definitely be times of flirting. It wasn't something that was like just like happened all of the time, but I think that it was more it was in all honesty and transparency, it was really wanting to have a friend and how to maintain a healthy relationship. Because, and I think too, what helped with that is that we both served in ministry together.
Yeah.
And eventually, and we didn't start off like this, but out of the 5 years before getting married, maybe around year 3, I want to say, we actually teamed up and became partners. And so in our ministry, we were going out, you know, as the great apostle was sending them out 2 by 2, we were being sent out. And so we ended up becoming part of that 2 by 2 team. And from there, getting a chance to know her more, seeing her minister, seeing the passion that she had before the Lord for other people, and the same with me. And we saw that it was very much intertwined and it was very much connected in terms of purpose. I remember a conversation, Derry, that I had with someone, and I was saying that I knew for me, and this was something too that helped keep me very grounded. I knew that the woman that I was going to marry, I said, because I know that God has called me to be a pastor, she would also too have to be a pastor with that shepherd's heart, because I wasn't going to dumb down in that. I've heard some stories, you know, where people who were in ministry, right, had a call of God on their life and was pursuing a woman to do ministry. And believe it or not, man, them pursuing that person in a lot of ways would cause them to be derailed from purpose. And I was really shocked by that, because I said, well, wait, if you got 2 people that both love the Lord, you know, you would think of anything, it should enhance that purpose, but not all the time. And so for me, I said, well, I know I don't want to be derailed from what God has called me to do. So whoever it is, God, it has to be someone that you fashion for me that will help me to accomplish the purpose that I'm called to do. And I will help to accomplish what they're called to do before you. And so I realized, like, wait, we're both in the harvesting field looking like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I think we go together like peas in a pod. And so, kind of moving from there.
And I'll say this, my husband, he's always been this way, very modest, very upstanding. But I'll say I thought the flirtation increased at certain junctures. I think the more that we learned about each other and how close we were getting, we would have these conversations like, what would it look like to be in a relationship? What would it be like, to have a romantic aspect, of the friendship that we have? Like, what would marriage look like? So we would talk those things out because we were friends. Yeah. But there were moments I know where my emotions were stirred. And I'm like, this dude, like,
Do you wanted him to ask you?
I don't know if it was a wanting him to ask me. I think I was just seeing that the kind of guy that girls dream about, like, I have a friendship with that guy. Like, at a moment, in my life and in this friendship, I didn't want to share him. Cause I'm like, Dad, somebody gonna scoop this guy.
That was my next question.
And how his dad told him, like, you gonna miss out on that one. I had those feelings all the time. Like, Dad, like, what if somebody marries Kyle? How will I feel?
Yeah.
Like, how would that be? And God tested me in that because, at one point in that last year before we were officially like engaged, there was someone else he was pursuing. Now, I had a friendship connection with that girl. Like, she and I weren't friends, but we had a mutual friend. And so I would go to like her events and stuff with this mutual friend. Now, she told that mutual friend that she was gonna tell him she didn't have any interest. Now, little old me is like, I should tell him. And God stopped me. And I said, because if that's ever gonna be real, I don't want it to be because I facilitated something by introducing this information. Like, he needs to have this process of deciding if he's going to choose me or not. Because by this point, we had several confirmations, several ministry relationships, several friendships where people were telling us, like, either y'all spirits seem so connected, like you guys seem like a married couple. If you're not, you're gonna be. We have friends like, we not talking to y'all until y'all quit playing with each other. So, just like for real, like
call us when y'all married.
Right.
Yeah,
And I think, Derry, being real, like people have these emotions, right? Like you're gonna feel a way about somebody this close to you who knows everything about you. So entertaining thoughts of a relationship or marriage, they came very naturally to me. I think what stopped it though, like Kyle said, God did have his hand on our friendship and had his hand on like the work that we were doing, which was very important to us. Yeah. And so when we would get to those junctures, I think we would both take that step back because we thought about it like, what are the ramifications of this too? How will this affect our team dynamics? How will this affect the people we minister to? Like, will it change or ruin our friendship and what we built? And I was afraid to lose that because I had never had that. And so I didn't want to do anything that I felt would breach the closeness that we had developed. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm making my little husband list. Women, those of you who know, we make a husband list. And I had like 50 things on there. And I had names of different ones because I was interested in a guy.
Yeah.
I was interested in a guy who was telling me, no, Kyle is the one you're supposed to be with. And so I had these names on this list. And as I'm ticking the boxes, Kyle was ticking every box. And I'm like, no, like I would ball it up, start over. Like it can't be. Like it just can't be. So I think we just were unwilling to accept that God had done a work there that neither of us were aware of how deep it was. And acknowledging that meant putting everything on the line for us.
Yeah. I didn't plan on going into that, but I think it's you guys can provide such wisdom and knowledge being friends for that long and having a healthy friendship in because we live in this culture where, like Steve Harvey was like at one point in time was the voice of relationships and this dude's been divorced 3 times. So I ain't taking my cues for him. But anyway, he talked about like men and women because, men, we only become friends with women that we're attracted to. is one of the things that he says, and I agree with him to a degree. And then you have to like define what friendship is and all those type of things. But a lot of young people are struggling with how do I become friends, or how do I, what's the balance and the boundaries that you guys set in place to make that work for 5 years? Because that's a lot. And you guys were spending a lot of time together.
Yeah.
We were
with
together.
ministry.
Oh my goodness.
And then the other question that I would ask is like, how did you being friends with this woman who was amazing, right? What was you thinking about pursuing somebody else?
You know what, man? So and man, you put some
Same
great
thing
things.
I like to throw in his face later.
Yeah. And you put some great things out there. So I think for me, right, in all transparency, is that I always think in my mind, like having that this idea of what you think the woman is that God have for you. And I'll explain that. So the woman that God have for you. I'm sorry, the woman that you want. And so, of course, you want them to look like this, you want them to look like this, and that. And so, what I was doing was, and I use the analogy of baking for a minute, right? I was putting in all the ingredients that I wanted throughout this span of time. But what's interesting is that all these ingredients I was adding in, the final product will all look the same. It would look good to the eyes, but wouldn't taste good. And it didn't start tasting good until I had a relationship with the Lord, and until I met her and I allowed him to put the ingredients in. I'll take it a step deeper. In the culture that we grow up in, right? I'm 35, so you think about the 90s, the early 2000s, all those things. We've been taking our cues from the media and from bad mistakes from other people.
Yeah.
Essentially, what we see on TV, what we hear from the music, and the perspective and the not so good experiences for other people. So imagine being a boy and it kind of being like, even having a dad at home, it's still kind of like from other, relatives and things like, man, you gotta sleep around with this person. You need a girl who body shaped like this and who could do this and who could do that. And then I realized this, right, at a certain point, is that all of these experiences lead to one thing. The attraction level is only based on the gratification piece. There's nothing about intelligence, both mentally and emotionally. There's nothing about the spiritual dynamic. All of those ingredients that I had to relinquish over to the Lord to allow him to put in, these is what everyone else is doing. And then it makes sense when you look at that everyone wants that picture of what that final product looks like on the box that you're using, but it don't taste like that. And so the Bible says this, it says that, I paraphrase but like, beauty and youth, those things are fleeting. Those things are fading away. Now, God didn't short me at all, i.e. example here. But for me, he took it a step further with what I was able to do. And I really believe this. You are only able, and I try not to make general statements, but this one is a general one. You are only able to attract the person that God wants you to have when you've come to a place when you are his. So you can only attract the kind of person that God wants you to have, or eyes open to that, when you're in a place that you want him to be. There were times, man, when I was early on, really before really giving my life to the Lord, I would go to the club and I was looking in the club for the person. I'm not saying that you can't find your spouse in the club, but that wasn't the route that God had for me. And I'm looking in all of these other places, and that's not what God had. God was bringing me to a place, one, where you was going to find your wife in the pasturing fields. You was going to find your wife in the process that I was doing in your life. And so all that to say, and this is something I've been thinking about as you've been talking, Derry, is that I believe this across the board. Another general statement. When it comes to marriage and really pursuing someone, right, with the goal of marriage and really wanting to spend the rest of your life with them, it is so important, man, that right? You don't come to that altar and you don't come to that decision and you don't live your life as a finished product, right? We're constantly being perfected by Christ. But you got to at least, man, be in the hands of the potter. A lot of us, we want the clay of the other person, what we want them to look like and what we want them to be. But you yourself are not being molded by the Father. And so how can you expect for him to do something like that when you're not even in his hands? It's like you telling him what you want in. And I think for me, after a certain point, I realized like, wait, it's not working. I'm tired of putting all these ingredients in and the cake look good, but it don't taste right. It's not moist. It's flat. There are things that I'm still missing. When I relinquished that and gave it to the Lord and allowed him to do it, the Bible says to taste and see that the Lord is good, meaning that his process, what he does for us, his character, all of those things get done. Man, I saw that God was able to form something beyond what I could imagine. But that was not aside from me being in the hand of the Lord and allowing him to do that. So a lot of people are saying like, man, where are all the good people? Man, when you going to get in the hands of God? Man, when you going to allow God to finish working on you? And not again that you'll be finished when God brings you together, but at least you'll be in a place where he can continue to mold you. And you're going to need that molding as you're together because we are broken and fallen people.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to stay in that state as long as we're in the hands of the potter, but it's not going to happen when you telling and telling God, okay, put this in, put this in. Well, what are you allowing him to put inside of you? What are you allowing him to take out? What are you allowing him to tell you yes about? What are you allowing him to tell you no?
No, that's real. I had this young lady ask, or she told me, she said, I want you to meet, my boyfriend, man, because I really want him, to get saved so he could turn his life around. And it wasn't the proper setting for me to say this to her, but in my mind I was thinking, well, if you want him to come to Christ, how is he seeing Christ in you? Because he ain't gonna spend that much. You spend more time with him than I do,
Right.
And so is he seeing the love of Christ in you, in your tone, how you speaking to him? Do you are you praying for him? Are you praying with him?
Yeah.
What Christ is he seeing from you? Because me and him can talk and hang out and we can go whatever, but he gonna be around you more than he around me.
That's true.
And so
Facts.
you got to be the first partaker in that. You know what I'm saying, and go from there. And so I mean, yeah, it's real what you just said. As far as us being at the place, walking with Jesus, so that he can let us know when that person is for us. And then a lot of times, most people meet people at church, at the place that they work at, or a place that they frequently go to a lot. You know what I'm saying? So it might be a coffee shop or the gym or something like that. You meet people where you spend the most time together. Y'all keep running into each other. So it's real, like community. And I think you guys' story is beautiful because it shows like the importance of community and healthy community.
Absolutely.
And having accountability and having people like speak into your life and confirm things. Because sometimes we be missing it. We be missing. We be just like off in the clouds, and it's like, man, stop playing games. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, if I was around at that time, I probably would have told Cal, like, man, you playing around.
Yeah.
I don't know you. I would have been thinking, just being real. I would have been. I thought y'all was together already.
We had that so much.
Yeah.
But
And
y'all
you know what?
What's going on here?
and to put it plainly, I think Kyle covered some really beautifully worded abstract principles of the word, right? And how that looks practically borne out. Like we will have people, don't be in a room alone together if you're in a house.
Yeah.
If you're gonna go out in groups or go somewhere public, like don't be, don't put yourself in a situation
No
where
Netflix
flesh
and
can
chilling.
act up.
No Netflix
Right?
and chill.
Yeah.
And it was so rare that we watched TV or did things like that. Where we started to bond was music, though. Like we have a love of 80s and 90s culture in general. And so we would have these battles, Prince versus Michael Jackson, like, who wore it better, like all of those things. So we filled up our time and our space with things that we knew would be edifying. But that wasn't always easy. Like flesh is going to be flesh and it's always warring against the spirit.
Yeah.
And so there were times where, we had to have people tell us, y'all sitting mighty close together on that couch. Like y'all diligently working. Like even our pastors would tease us. They would come out and put a ruler between us. And so, like, just kicking it real old school, like, okay, now. But
we need to get back to that.
that was one, look, for real, because that was a choice that we made. Like, if we ever did any work together, we did it at our pastor's house or in our church setting, somewhere that, there will be covering. And to keep ourselves like true to what we were doing, like we're not just coming together and saying we working so we can spend time. When we wanted to spend time, we did, and we made sure it was known. Like, I'm gonna go downtown with Kyle, or I'm gonna go do this, over here. But I think it was the frequency of that where people were like, oh, okay, like you're hanging out with Kyle, okay,
yeah.
But
how do you balance the emotion connection and build up of? I know for me, if I spend that much time with a woman, there is going to be like, this is my woman. You know what I'm saying? There is going to be some I love yous probably said when the relationship gets that deep. How did y'all balance that?
Yeah.
It was it got tricky at times. Like, I'll just say we shared a kiss at one point. And so, I know, right? And it was like midway through our friendship too. So it was, at a critical juncture where we were at that point, like figuring out, like, is this something more, than what we're thinking? We're spending a lot of time together. It was like around his birthday time, and he wanted to spend it with me. And I'm like, okay, like, all right. So we went out, we shared that moment. But I think before that moment happened, even then we had a conversation. We're like, we know if we take this step, that's going to change everything. And so I think it required being very responsible. So I would say that to people who are dating or who are in friendships, you got to be very responsible and very mature and being very open about what you're working towards and defining what your relationship is. Because if you don't know, anything can happen with every decision that you make. And so for us, it was a matter of responsibility and knowing, like, we're crossing a line here we've never crossed before.
Yeah.
And it's because we want to see what happens. We want to know, will this lead to something more? And after that, didn't happen again. Like, we didn't even bring it up or talk about it until later. But there will be these times we would look at each other and I knew we were remembering it. And so there was always like that.
It's a whole movie,
Pull.
y'all. This is
We definitely have a movie
is,
like
a
that.
whole movie.
Yeah, we got some brown sugar in there.
BET, reach
some-
out.
Right.
Yeah,
Brown
yeah,
sugar,
yeah,
love
yeah.
basketball. Look,
13
look,
going on
we in
30.
there.
Yeah.
This
No
isn't even
bud.
what this podcast was supposed to go. We're supposed to be talking about our mindsets pre-burial. So we're going to listen. I'm doing an event, and I need y'all on the panel just to talk to some stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to get
Yeah.
into while we're here.
Yes.
That was great.
Yeah.
That's great. I think. Oh man. We'll have to revisit. Maybe we'll do a part 2 or something.
Absolutely.
So funny.
Soon. We live close to each other. What we could do.
Right.
I might just be like, come downstairs and they're gonna
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
do it
yeah.
right there in our living room.
Yeah.
We down.
But yeah. So, what kind of thoughts on marriage did you think? Did you have? Like, man, marriage is gonna fix this, or marriage is gonna make me happy, or marriage is gonna be, everything to me. What kind of myths or false expectations did you guys have about marriage before you actually got there? And
Yeah.
realized it was different.
Okay. Rock, paper, scissors.
Yep.
Okay.
This is great. This is great. Look at this.
Okay. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So I grew up.
Is that how like y'all normally like?
We
Oh,
do,
yeah.
how we settle anything,
Man,
even
we
down
do-
to changing the
Oh
Pampers.
man, changing the
Oh,
Pampers.
that-
That
Yeah.
was the quickening of the Lord.
It was.
The back and forth. Who's gonna do that? Who doing that?
We had to keep it fair.
Yeah,
Like,
we're gonna use a universal.
yeah,
you know-
a method of decision
Hey, did we
making.
talk about casting lots last week? It was like they were like, "Hey, which disciple we gonna make?"
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Just cast
Right,
these lots.
right,
We're
right.
gonna pray over it. Then we're gonna be like, "I bet." All right,
Yeah. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I
babe.
love that. I love that. That's a weird perspective first right there.
Yes. So I grew up in a family of women. My mom has 3 sisters and a brother. My uncle has lived in and out of the city, so wasn't around as much. But I grew up very close to my family, like all of my aunts, all of my cousins lived with my grandma. My mother lived in that same building, like it was a family building. But none of my aunts and my mother either, like none of them had solid marriage relationships until they were way past their 40s. A couple of them had been married before and just things didn't work out. And so my picture of marriage was non-existent. It was these very strong intellectual women, very self-sufficient, all single parents. And so I came into my walk of faith thinking marriage is not for me. Like, I don't like the idea of feeling like I have to submit to a man. Like, I had all of those kinds of ideas. Like, it's, me having to do whatever my husband say, and I got to be home and barefoot and pregnant. Like, all of the adages we've grown up hearing. I really adopted that
You was
thinking.
Destiny's Child.
Look, I was.
Throw your hands up.
Yes. I was. And, I had grown to become this very independent woman in the Lord and discovering myself. And I'm like, I don't want to lose that to no man, like, and be overshadowed by that. And so, marriage was rocky for me. And when I finally did decide I want marriage, it was motivated largely by sex. Like, I'm waiting on the Lord. And because I've had a sexual history, I'm like, I know that, I don't want to cross any lines and make those mistakes again. Like, even in my walk of faith, like, those are things that happen. And so I'm like, I need to be stable. Like, I want to have a relationship. So I was one of those people who thought like marriage will cure that. Like, I won't, have issues with lust. I won't have issues with, desiring to step outside of marriage. Like, I won't have those issues because marriage will fix that. And so
The first woman I ever heard mention the lust part. Usually I hear men talk about it.
Oh, yeah. Well,
good.
yeah, that's a thing. That's a real thing for women. And I think it's been kind of taboo in our culture because we expect women to kind of be silent in certain situations or to not have the same mindset that men have. But we think about sex, like we think about other people, like we think about who we want to engage with and in what way in relationships. We just probably aren't as vocal about it or as transparent. And I think we should be because we have as much responsibility in the relationship as the man does. He might set the tone, but we have a responsibility to respond to that tone in the appropriate way.
Yeah.
And I was not accustomed to that. And so I valued my freedom, to be my own woman. And I thought that that would be overshadowed in a marriage relationship. And when I did desire marriage, as I was saying, I had these conditions, I had these ideals, and I'm like, he's got to be this way, he's got to be this way. I had my list, right? But sometimes our list even can be more of a dream than what you really expect in a relationship. It's like this thing over here that you got, but then when you're in conversation and face to face with a person, you're thinking about other things. And so for me, I had to have a lot of I had a lot of people covering me with prayer, just in my personal walk. Because, I struggle with pornography. I struggle with lust. I struggle with, these experiences in past relationships I had. And so at one point I was leaving all of my media devices at my pastor's house. I didn't want access. And I needed that time to reshape and reform and transform the way I thought about men, the way I thought about myself. And that's why Kyle was such a refreshing breeze in my life, because I'm like, I'm not having to respond to a demand to be that thing that was so warped and so perverse. It challenged me to be a woman of God and say, these are the standards of holiness. Not what I say, but what God's word says. And to have a man hold me to that was like, oh, like this is a mind blower. And so that was a process of encouragement for me to know not only were the people you expect, your sisters in the Lord, your friends, your parents, your pastors, they were all holding me accountable, but so was he. And so that I felt protected in that as a woman.
So I have three things, and that was great, babe. To what you said. really, really good and
Just
really
want to
spot
keep
on.
it real, because
Yeah,
these are the things people struggle with.
Absolutely.
And you can go to your pastor and say, this is my boyfriend, this is someone I'm in a relationship with. You don't go up to them and say, this is who I'm thinking about having sex with, this is who I'm spending
Man.
time with, in a car alone or in a room alone. Like, you don't put those things out there. It's almost like that's what could happen, but you don't talk about how that gets borne out, in those situations. And I think we should be aware. I think this is how we should make our kids aware, that every decision you make, every relationship you're in, these are the ramifications of the decisions that you make in that.
Yeah. So for me, 3 things I want to hit on: lust, life, and love. One for lust, and I know that I didn't really realize that when I was in it. Again, something that Kinei said. One being, a kid and being exposed to pornography and R-rated things, and not just pornography, just straight adult film, but also in that even some of the TV shows that we watch. When I think sometimes they call it like more kind of like soft porn or something like that. All of those things are connected. It's all leading to one thing. It's all leading to you having this addictive experience. And so being exposed to that, not including the music, right? That we listen to. And I think now, to be honest, we're at a point now where there's a plethora. And it's glorified. There's a plethora of items to get into. And so being exposed with so many of those things, a myth that I thought is that, when you get married, like at that altar, there's this magic wand that gets waved and it all goes away. On the contrary, if you don't have the stamina and faith in the Lord, those things, not only do they not stop, or they don't slow down, they increase, because now you're fighting for something now. So now that lust is now in contention with the covenant. The Bible says that the flesh wars with the spirit and the spirit with the flesh, that they are at enmity with one another. One of the most practical ways that that's played out, even in the life of the unbeliever, is that commitment to being married to that person. Not if you ever cheat with someone, but how's your thoughts like? Again, we are in a time where it is so sexually hyper with everything. I mean, even if you didn't watch half of the things that you watch, I mean, the music,
TV shows,
books.
I mean, for these kids,
man.
It's like, why y'all gotta make these kids?
Jesus,
who living like this?
Yeah.
Where they parents at?
Yeah,
right.
They be in jail.
And so with
It's
all of
crazy.
those things
For
and
real.
being exposed to that, like constantly, even now, like having to be reminded, like, nope, you can't do that. And so it's almost like allowing the Holy Spirit, which he'll do if you're willing and open, allowing him to set that. Where some people would say, oh, that's nothing harmless. For others, this is detrimental. I won't have Facebook on my phone. I won't have Instagram, because all of these things are leading to one thing. It's images, it's posting, it's this, it's this, it's this. And so
And
for
that
me,
starts to shape your own standards, whether
Absolutely.
you realize that or not.
Yeah.
The thing that you're seeing constantly is forming an ideal for you.
Yeah.
To say, this is what it should be, this is how it should go, this is what's acceptable.
Absolutely.
Even if you're being told something different, the majority starts to rule, in that matter.
So part of that, right, we know the spiritual context, but even in the natural sense, the psychological damage that's being redone. We're called to have our minds renewed by the word of God. When you are opening yourself up willingly to images that are contrary and wars against that, it puts you in this constant state, I believe, of, double-mindedness, right, in a lot of ways. And so for me, that was a big myth.
Yeah.
Marriage is not this magic thing, and it's not this eraser that just makes those things go away. But all the more, there's the fight that you have to have. There's the stamina in the Lord. And I'm not talking about a fight within you of your own strength. The Bible says, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. I'm talking about your eyes being on Jesus. And I think now more than ever, marriages now are at an all-time high where you have lust ruling and reigning. Even in, I'm not just talking about the things that you're aware of, but what about the things that you're unaware of as well? I wanted to talk about the second point I named as
Before
Life,
you move
yeah.
on from that, can I say something, honey?
Yeah.
In regards to the lust, I think that, if you're somebody who doesn't quickly think of spiritual things, if you're one of those people like, this is wrong, this is right according to the Bible, but you don't think more deeply about that. One of the things that helped me, because I wasn't that kind of person either, I always had to deal with what was right in front of me, what's real, like what's connected to relationship.
Yeah.
I would look around. One of the things that helped us in terms of being in ministry and doing so much was we were exposed to people's lives in a very deep and personal way, and in intimate settings and situations where we got to know couples who were not married and see the brokenness there, whether they realized it or not, their kids were affected. And those things were heartbreaking to us.
Man.
Like, this is definitely not what we want. Looking back at our own lives, like things our parents went through, things our relatives went through, like those things started to become more and more of an eye opener for us. Like, that's not what we want. Like this, we know how bad this is and how bad it gets when you're spending time ministering the gospel to people and it's not connecting. It's not affecting them because they've lived under this cloak of darkness for so long that they don't even see the hurt and the woundedness there. And having that kind of prophetic life, like where we can go in and we see like, this is a mess right here. Like this all needs Christ. We were that much more aware that we could be in danger of the same thing if we cross lines that shouldn't be crossed.
That's good.
With the life part, when I touch on something my wife just said, and that was good, babe. A myth was that in marriage, right, knowing everything is not going to be perfect, but it's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to experience it. I have had some of the most challenging moments for myself personally and as us as a couple with doing this in terms of marriage. I mean, from family fallouts to, our own,
Ministry
yeah,
involvement.
Yeah. Our
That is
own,
the nice way to put it.
yeah, our own expectations from one another, right? Of what that means. And so you're constantly, marriage is a challenge. Let's get that out. That's another myth. It's not all lovey-dovey. It is a constant challenge. Now that challenge is not just that it's unhealthy tension, but I believe that it can lead to some beautiful things when it's done with God at the helm and it's done with two people who eyes are on God.
Yeah.
It can really be amazing and it can really be extraordinary, right? The marriage of a man and woman, right, is a reflection of what Christ has done on the cross for his body and is constantly doing as he's making us one.
You're
It's a
saying
reflection
something
of
critical.
that.
Can I say something
Absolutely,
there?
babe.
As much as it involves the couple and God, having wise, responsible counsel around you is everything.
Yes.
If you got friends in your ear
Man.
telling you, go ahead, sleep with this man, go ahead, sleep with this woman,
Yeah.
them ain't the friends you want.
Not at all.
And a lot of times you can look in those friends' lives and be like, that ain't what I want. And so, having the right counsel around you makes a huge difference. When you have people in your ear pushing you towards worldliness, pushing you towards even your own rationale and your human understanding and can't point you towards the word, then you might want to reevaluate your circle and who's around you, because it made a difference to us to have accountability. And at the same time, in terms of ministry involvement, you don't want so much accountability. And I say this, and I'm just going to be as raw as I say it in our arguments. Your pastor doesn't belong in your bed. He may be in your house. He may be able to speak to some things that go on there, but ultimately that's you and him, or that's you and her. And so you have to be able to evaluate like what decisions are just between us, what situations are just between us, and what things do we need to bring in some further counsel about. One of the things that I appreciate our spiritual mother told us, we asked for premarital counseling and we asked for counseling after we were married. And she said, for what? The Holy Spirit can counsel you. And so she said, unless there's a dire situation where we need to be brought in, we respect the fact that you're married. Like, this is going to be your walk. We ain't going to be there to help you raise your kids, to help you decide your finances, to help you decide, where you're going to work and if you're going to work together. So those are myths that I think too can be debunked that you got to have over involvement from your pastors or none at all. You got to find that middle ground that makes sense for the kind of couple you are.
And I think that ties in too, babe, with the level of maturity, which goes into the caption I'm talking about in terms of life. So for us, man, we have gone through some things, and you know, there's a difference between, I believe, Derry, as a single person, when you make a mistake, it's you to blame. When you're married and you make a mistake, you have to be very, you've got to really look outside of yourself and look at things. It's easy to post blame on someone else. And I think as humans, we naturally just tend to go that way. I usually don't want to make general statements. That's a general one I'll make. I think a lot of times, I mean, naturally speaking, we want to blame someone. That's back in the garden with Adam, right? Doing that. When you're married, it says a lot when it's easier to post blame on someone, and it's another to be able to own up to something rather than saying, see, I knew you was going to let me down, or I knew you was going to do that, as opposed to say, man, what have I done to set the tone for that? And definitely as the husband, my job is to protect her. My job is to provide for her. My job is to make sure that she has what she needs so that she can do her purpose in God. And her purpose in God, even though it is before God, it is still attached to who I am, and vice versa.
I don't think people know how hurtful that statement is I knew you were going to let me down. Like what that can do to a person. Because it was like, you was already thinking, what do you really think about me?
Right, expecting me to fail.
Which is why I go back to this point here. You have to constantly be in the hands of the Lord. When you are married, there are things that will come out about you. And I say that across the board. And I think that's why we have divorce rates as high as we do, because it's another level of being challenged with your commitment to God. You familiar with the movie X-Men: The Last Stand? I like comic books, so I use those analogies.
We Marvel people at my house, so.
In that, and
Fox did some damage, but we getting over it.
Okay,
we healing.
I want to use this. I want to use this analogy. In The Last Stand, in the last scene in the movie, which is a real powerful scene, when Wolverine is having to kill the love of his life, the Phoenix,
Jean Grey,
who is disintegrating everybody. You talking about
even him at the time,
right? Even him. I'm talking about sweeping the competition away, like literally, like, you know, no one is able to stand before her. And
she was dusting people before Thanos.
She was way before Thanos, and didn't even have a gauntlet. So as this is happening, there's a thing I want people to see in that, right? Kind of jokes aside, but the closer that he gets to her, the more his flesh is being ripped off. When we talk about the cross is not some gummy bear item that's just, it's just fuzzy feelings about Jesus. Let me just hug the cross. No, the cross is a constant reminder of what he had to do because of our ongoing ratchet state. What he did on the cross, it took care of something that there was no other way it would have been taken care of, so that we can't have a relationship with him. But for eternity, those piercings in his hands and those piercings in his feet, they are still there as a reminder of what had to be done. The closer that we get to that cross, your flesh should be getting ripped off. You are constantly being drawn to this work that God did on the earth to save us from our deprived state of being. And so in marriage, it's two people that have to daily make this decision to get closer to this cross. My flesh is going to be peeled. I'm going to be exposed. I'm going to be vulnerable. And see, it's easy to hide when you don't have someone who's there to hold you accountable. Because you can have two people both driving the wrong direction. But when you got one person saying, babe, I don't think you should go this way. Babe, turn here. Babe, let's stop and let's reassess where we're going. And we've not mastered that. But there have been times where we've had to pull on that and do that. I'll give you a case in point of something. Early on in our marriage, maybe like either year 1 or year 2, we were at home. And I never forget this. We were having an argument about something. And it was really, really intense. And I remember we were yelling at each other. And I'll never forget this, Derry. As we were talking, my wife was like here. And in the corner of my eye, like I could see, it was like it was this dark image that was there. And I knew in my spirit that it was the enemy. And he was laughing at us arguing. And in the middle of us arguing, I said, babe, let's stop. Because whatever we're doing, we're attracting something that is not God, and the enemy is taking advantage of this now. And that was one of the things I think that was a turning point, that how we deal with one another. How I talk to her is a reflection of how I view myself, and vice versa. There are certain ways that I'm not going to talk to her, and I'm not going to treat her that way, because God is constantly aware of that. Now, that doesn't mean that there was sometimes I could be so heated that I still, don't care about those things, but
I'm not as restrained. Help me, Lord.
Yeah. And we have those things. And I don't listen to her as good as I can. And I think that, again, that goes to the fact of, being 10 years married now. It don't mean that we've perfected our walk. Like every day we getting up and we hugging the cross. Nah, some days like I don't feel like going to the cross.
And every couple is not going to have, the experience of having a friendship first. But I think God saw us and the kind of people we are and knew that we needed that, because we kind of deal with each other like that, where something might be awkward coming up, talking about money, talking about intimacy. Like, we've had such a unique history of talking openly with each other. We talk like friends about those things. It's like those divine moments where we can pull on our friendship and just get past the weirdness of it or the tension of it even, and deal with things as friends. But there are other moments where, and just kind of using the same analogy but in a different way with Jean Grey, Phoenix is a whole other person. I'm not the woman I was 10 years ago when we got married. And so even dealing with the changes in personality and how, life and ministry and children affect and shape who you are. Yeah. I'm like, oh my goodness. Even I'd be scared, like, dang, like, who am I now? Like, but just dealing with that and having to still consider my husband is a process of growth for me. Yeah. I think something that you just said, babe, going back to the first point I was making about the lust part. As a couple, I think that it's very important in understanding that the things that you've been exposed to and the things that you've done, those things don't have to continue to be a part of who you are. But I think it's important to note those things and highlight those weaknesses. Sometimes people don't want to go back and they don't want to have to look at things. But if you walk with the Lord and you stay around him close enough, he revisits those things in your past. Not to shame you, not to hold them over your head, but I believe it's always healing to do that. And we know the process of healing is not putting a band-aid over something and saying, hey, it's healed. No, it's to lift up whatever is covering it, the veil of deception, and get to the root of the matter so that it does not continue to be a reoccurring thing. Even if it hurts. Even if it hurts.
And there's going to be some scars.
And there's going to be some scars, right? Just like with Wolverine, all his flesh was pretty much gone as he got closer. When we do that, I believe as we get closer to the cross, it's not that we go through this, rigmarole of just doing something, but I have to die daily to my flesh so that I can love her the way that Christ loves his church. And I don't do that perfectly, but I know that that's what it should be. I know the word of God does not lie. And so that has to be something that we cling to. The last point that I was making, so lust, life, and love. There's a ongoing, I've seen various ministers cover this, and I'm so grateful for it because it's one of the realest things, man, that I've heard since being married. Love is not waking up every day having strong emotions for a person. You can love someone and not say it, but it's showing your actions. Love is not constantly saying to this person, I love you, but not changing your ways, not changing your attitude, not doing what you know you need to do, but failing to do it and unwilling to do it. Love is being able to look at you and I could say, man, I'm not really feeling you right now, but I'll do what's necessary because I know that that's what God requires.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
And I think it's important to note too, love is not equivalent with sex or romance. We were told early on in our marriage, the romance is going to go and it's probably going to go real quick. Now, we were blessed to have a very long honeymoon phase. I would say probably that first 4 or 5 years, like, it was bliss. Even after Symphony was on the scene, it was still like we got teased for what was our nickname? Duct tape. Because people would hear us just finding corners to kiss in. And so
because we had waited so long, so we didn't care. Shoot,
we didn't
Conversation
either.
kind of like, hold up, I'll be right back.
yeah.
Man, if you're ever disgusted by PDA, don't be near us. Like it was just a thing, you know. And so we were blessed to have
Signs
that
of
time.
a blessed marriage right there.
Yeah,
blessed marriage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think though it's important because when the romance, you know, is more of a fight, and you have to be more intentional to keep that alive, and more intentional to keep your intimate life alive. I think that is a point of people divorcing also, where they feel like the intimacy has failed because it's not coming as easy as it did before. No, you get to a juncture in your marriage, every marriage, where you have to work to tend that as well.
Yeah, speaking of, go ahead, you got another point?
I was just really quick to what you said, and that was great, babe. And it's something I thought about before. It's like talking to Derry and kind of using another analogy of building a fire. So for 10 years, and at least for the first 5, kind of breaking it down, the first 5, we were building this altar. Your marriage is an altar unto the Lord. And so we're building, I believe we have been in a stage in building this altar. The next couple years after that, even of our first baby and our second baby, we have been, you know, having this flame going, right? And even as of now with 3 kids, right? And where we are coming up on year 10, celebrating God's covenant, our covenant with one another and before the Lord. Now we're having to find, Derry, very transparently, we're having to find ways to grow our flame and to protect our flame. That fire is not just going to go off of the original stuff that we had there 5 years ago. We have to constantly add to cause the flame to grow. And not just to grow the flame, but also to protect the flame as well.
Yeah.
Because now what we're realizing is that the seasons are changing. And so some seasons are windier than others. Some seasons are colder than others. Some seasons are this and that. And so what we're having to do is to provide the necessary material to protect and sustain this flame. And I think that's kind of where we're going. And sometimes the kids will put your flame out. Sometimes it'll be other voices that put your flame out.
Remember what I told you? I said, hey, you need to bring the kids down here.
Oh, man.
You ain't got to tell me why. Just, hey,
Look,
Derek, can you hold the kids down
look,
for a minute? I got you, bro.
And look,
Bring them on down here, dog.
And you
work that out.
And you know what? And sometimes, man, we need that, right? Not just for the, you know, the growing of intimacy. And I think that's another myth, is that I think that we believe marriage is 95% sex and 5% just
The other stuff.
And that's not the case.
It's not the case.
I
at all.
really
Not at
believe
all.
that sex is more so 5% and everything else is the 90%. Your marriage is what you put in it. I'll use another analogy, right? Our marriage is like a vehicle, right? And, you know, whatever kind of car you driving, you need to really study that vehicle. You need to study one another before the Lord. And we need to look at his handbook on what's required for this vehicle. With a Mercedes-Benz or whatever luxury car you're driving, and I believe that God does things in the best, so your marriage is of high quality. So everybody in this playing field, it has nothing to do with money. When I say that, when you get married, God instantly promotes you to a higher standard or a higher value, right? So with a higher value vehicle, just speaking of Mercedes, a Lexus, a BMW, whatever you driving, I can't put 87 in there. I can't put what I think is the best thing. I can't put corn oil in that. I got to put in the desired thing that's supposed to go in that. Right. And it's always a higher octane. So for us right now in our marriage, we need a higher octane to sustain us. What could sustain us 5-6 years ago is not compatible for where we are now. She's a different person. I'm a different person. God is the same. So all the more we've got to cling to him, because if we're changing, right? And all the change is always that option of if I'll go back and be the old person, or will I move forward in Christ and become the new person, right? That should be there. That's constantly the thing. But all that to say, man, your marriage is a vehicle, and what you put in your marriage has a lot to do with how far you're going, the process of the destination, and all those things. Sometimes we've had to stop. Sometimes we've sped up. Sometimes we've gone the wrong way. And when you get tired of arguing with one another, then it's like, okay, us arguing doesn't make this car go in the right direction. We've got to stop. We've got to assess. We've got to go through the process of turning back around and getting back where we should be.
Follow your holy GPS.
The holy GPS. And now you said something earlier that was funny. Yeah, rerouting. And so that means that the voices on social media, I don't want nobody telling me how my marriage needs to be. First of all, if you're not following the Lord, certain things are good facts, but there are certain things that are absolute truths. Everything God says is absolute truth. Other things that people say, they're facts, which means that they're conditional based on the experience of what that person goes through. Everything is not profitable for us. Everything that is profitable for us is the things that God has. Now, yeah, that may be some, nuggets of wisdom that's dropped to say, hey, you know what, we could utilize that. But more times than not, our playbook, our day-to-day is the word of God. Our second confirmation is that brothers and sisters who've been married a lot longer than us, like, man, you and Tawata are such a blessing.
Yes.
We learn from you guys, even without you saying anything. Like, we're peeping
We're
that.
just gleaning.
We're gleaning from that. And so that says a lot. But I'm not going to get my wisdom from someone who the world looks at as, oh, this is a relational guru. We don't need relational gurus. We need people who are willingly submitting themselves to the Lord in their covenant and being able to follow them as they follow Christ.
And then also just older people that's walking with us.
Yeah.
That can speak because they know our situations. They know
Yeah.
what we've
They've been here
They
before.
know, they're willing to walk with us, and they have walked with us through different trials and tribulations in our lives. And so when they speak, it's like, okay, they know because they know us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They've been there, they've been around, they've seen us. And so
That's it.
yeah, those things are really good. I want to touch on some kids, and then I'm going to respect you guys' time, and we're going to get up out of here.
Okay.
But what are some myths that you had when it came to kids? Did y'all have a big family, a small family, no kids at all?
So we would talk about this. Like, we would walk up the block, and there's a particular home that I really loved in our neighborhood. And, at one point I was doing this walk on my own and looked at that house, and it was just dropped in my spirit, a desire for a large family, particularly 8 kids. Woo. Why? I'm like, I went from being a person, one, who didn't want to be married to wanting to be married and only wanting 2 to now 8. And it was so real though, Derry. Like, it dropped in there so real. I'm like, I know this God, because it just wiped every other thought process I had out. Like, I want a big family. And so I would talk to him about it, and he would smile and he would nod. He would never say nothing else, in regards to it.
Yay be yay and your no be no.
Yeah, that's great, babe. Yeah.
Right. And this is before we got married. And so, and again, coming back to that, so you asked us earlier, like the process of dating and all of that. We don't knock dating. We encourage healthy boundaries. Some of those boundaries, like we said, having good accountability. So anyway, I'm saying that to say, like, we didn't have these conversations in a dating process or even during our engagement process. Like, these are the things as friends we got to know about each other. And so there were no false expectations going into our marriage. We even had one person tell us, like, I had my spiritual mother asked me, she said, is there anything about Kyle you would change? And she asked it in a general way, so I wasn't seeing no trap coming or nothing like that. And I said no. And she was like, good, because if you had said yes, I would have told you to run. He is the man he's going to be. Like, there may be some aspects that change, but generally we are who we are by 2021. We kind of know what we want, and our personality is developed. And
I'm sorry. I think that's we probably need to have a whole podcast just on that, because I think certain people think it might be a little flaw about a person, or it could something really small, and then it be deal breakers for them. And it's like, but that person is amazing. They have goals and dreams. They love the Lord.
Yeah.
Their character is great, but you tripping because that one little curl in their hair, you don't like it. And you like, I wish they would just shave that off. And it's just like, I don't really like that. And I think we got a lot of that.
Oh my goodness, the
going on.
superficial ideals. Yeah. This is why we're still in love, and he can squeeze my toothpaste in the middle like a psycho. And so, And so to talk about kids though.
That's another one. Yeah, that's another podcast there. But yeah. But yes.
But we would talk about this, and like I said, he would just kind of support like this dream that I had. And when it came down to it, we took a month when the subject of marriage came up in a real way, and Kyle asked me. We took a month, even still after that asking. And it was very informal. Like there was no ring or anything like that. I wouldn't have did him like that. But I said, if you are serious about that, you need to talk to my father's spiritual father, birth father, and I will know that you are for real. He did do that. And we took a month just to process before the Lord. We still worked together. We still did all our normal things, but we ceased like having our long phone conversations at night. We didn't do dinner and stuff like that anymore, just so the cloudiness wouldn't be there. I wanted to be sure, and I needed him to be sure.
Yeah.
And so we took that month, and that was September to October. October, sweetest day, we were engaged. January that following year, we were married. So we had a 4-month engagement. So very short, but I think that it helped to put things like kids and talk about that on the table and be clear that going into this is what we're agreeing to. And even though we didn't say it openly at the time of engagement about the 8 kids, Kyle came on board. And I know like that wasn't just me. Like I knew he loved me, but I'm like, you don't just agree to 8 kids. And now that we have 8 kids, you know, we'll see how that gets borne out. But he came into that, and it was just so natural that 2 years before we had our first child, we already had the names picked out and put up on a wall. And so that was like, it was very special. When they actually got here is a different story. Oh, yeah. And so, yeah. We didn't know what to expect.
Expectations
right.
changed.
Yeah,
Oh,
greatly.
Like,
greatly.
you really you want 5 more of these? 5 more.
Because some of them, they're like 3.
Yeah.
Even though it's 1, it's like
Right.
they're equivalent to 3. And
Anybody who knows our daughter Jerusalem
yeah.
knows that she is like 3 kids in one.
Yeah. And so
Personality wise,
Yeah.
all the sauce and smoke she came to bring, she bringing it now.
It's super cute. And you be like, oh, and then she had this look, and she look at you.
Yeah.
And you be like, I don't want no smoke.
Yeah.
Whatever I did, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Derry,
I'm sorry.
Derry,
Can I get a hug?
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
We've been saying she's if you've seen the Sour Patch commercials, the Sour Patch Kids, they do something heinous and then they come give you a hug.
Yeah.
I said that's my daughter.
From heinous to hug.
To heinous to hug. And so I think for me, it is God has already met us. Like our kids were blessed and they were answered a prayer.
Yeah. Like we tried for the first 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Solomon was a surprise. Our last child was a surprise.
Yeah. And so I think God putting that desire to have children in us was a gift. You know, when we knew, you know, it was time. And I believe that no child is an accident. Even the ones that are born out of wedlock. No child is an accident. And timing is everything to God because he's over time. And so when ours came, we knew it was the right time. We knew, you know, everything with that. I think now, you know, just kind of where we
now
are.
Tell the full truth. You did make me take 3 tests with Solomon.
Oh yeah, because I couldn't believe it because it was legitimately like it was a surprise.
It was a shock.
Yeah,
Y'all was being safe and like not trying at that time.
We were being safe. And weren't trying. No, it wasn't even on our radar.
Yeah.
I think we just had too fun of a date night, and you know,
God was like,
shout outs to the date night.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
You married, date each other.
Yes.
Go on
Please
dates.
do
Yes,
have
yes.
fun, have so much fun.
That's it. So that was the thing. I think now, if we don't have 8 kids, I think that's fine. We have one more. You know, we'll be blessed. But
we didn't want 8 natural kids. Like adopting was always like something that we desired. And so we had a rough process too. So I think that bonded us more than repelled, like bringing kids on the scene, how that changes a marriage.
Yeah.
It bonded us because we went through so much. Every last one of my pregnancies were really tough. For the 2 that were planned, it was a really long process. So I struggled, you know, with my own feelings, like, you know, just would we be able to be pregnant again? So all of those things, just it was a different dynamic that was produced than what we thought.
Yeah, but always an answer to prayer. So I think, you know, where we are now, I mean, we're grateful. We're processing it. But man, it's a challenge. It's a day-to-day challenge because
Has your thought process changed now as a father of 3? Like, did you think like my kid's gonna be like this?
oh yeah, that was the
then-
question. Oh, absolutely. I felt like I'm a very good-natured person. So I'm probably the only one on the planet, I'm thinking in my mind, that carries the
Deluded.
righteous gene. So my kids are gonna be righteous and they're gonna be. So yeah, that's definitely been challenged. I would consider myself before kids being someone very patient. I'm realizing now why that is a fruit of the spirit and why it's something you constantly need.
You gotta pray for.
Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, that's definitely being put to the test.
Them
And I think,
girls giving Kyle a run for his
oh
money.
yeah, and I wanted girls. You know, I did want that, and was blessed, you know, to
Yeah.
have
Yeah, that was
our
unique.
son. And so, but now just realizing, like, one, you parent out of the place that you've been in, which is why we need the Heavenly Father.
Oh my goodness.
Because there are
Yeah.
certain things, don't matter how saved you are, speaking in tongues, oil carrying, whatever. There are certain
You still
things
need
that-
those things.
You still need those
But-
things, right? But there are certain things that the Father, that He does, that we constantly have to draw on. And so, yeah, there are constant, you know, things that kind of seeing now that challenges that myth that your kids are gonna listen to you all the time.
Yeah.
You won't be questioned on certain things. Like, no, because part of it is you have to train up the child at the way that they should go.
Yeah.
God is not the one that's training them up. You know, only it's you as the partner, as you as the parent that's partnering with God to train them up. And then the
Yeah.
question is, what are you training them up with?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's really important, the things that we're imparting to them, the things that we're pouring into them, so that, you know, ultimately we can see the God results that we want to
Yeah.
see on the other end.
Yeah.
That's good.
Seeing them as whole people, I think, helped me.
Yeah.
You know, we come from that culture, right, where children are seen and not heard.
Yeah.
You ain't doing certain things, you know,
Yes.
very, very strict background.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it, like we talked through parenting, because right, these are tough points that come up in marriage, you know, money, parenting, and intimacy. And
Yeah.
so we talked about parenting and what kind of parents we wanted to be. We've both had and experienced abuse in our backgrounds. And so we were very intentional about the way we wanted to talk to our children, the way we want to encourage them. But ultimately it came down to, for me, seeing my child as a whole person and our children as whole people and not an extension of me.
Yeah.
They're an extension of God.
Yeah.
And so that helped me to put in perspective, like, she may say something or he may say something that I don't agree with, that ain't come from me, but it might have come from God. And so seeing that carried out in its own unique way has given me a lot more patience and grace to say, okay, you know, we can talk about consequences, we can talk about the ramifications of your decisions and your words, but I am going to let you say them, or I might let you do them, depending on what it is, just so we can, you know, talk through it. And you're equipped as a person who's not leaning so much on the strictness of mama to where you're afraid to have experiences, but you can handle them, you know, when they come up.
Yeah.
So.
Two more questions, but before I get to these 2 more questions, these are fun questions.
Yeah.
Have you guys had to deal with, like, well, I was raised like this, and so, like, whether it was discipline or how we talk to the kids? Because I've had experience where, man, I had to, like, tell my mom, like, Mom, we don't parent like that. Well, that's how I raised you. And it's like, I understand that, but if you want to watch my kids, this is how we do things. And for a minute, it brought a little wedge, and she was looking at me like, boy, I know you. And I was just like, this is what we doing over here.
Yeah, I think we've had 2. I think one, I'll give it 2 examples really quick, one with us and then one with our parents. So I grew up in a time where, you know, the belt was a thing. It could happen, and then even the rod, like, you knew what was coming. So for me, again, one of my expectations was like, oh, my kid's not gonna do certain things, because I could probably count on one hand, Derry, how many times I got a whooping. I didn't like pain, and so I was wise enough to know don't do the thing that's gonna get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Or
Even Kyle's parents say, like, he was such a good boy. Like, he just didn't do anything to get in trouble.
and for me it was the pain. I didn't like the consequence of things.
And I was a daredevil.
I was about
And
to say, I was a
I
heathen.
didn't care about pain.
And see,
Heathenry.
I got some daredevils now.
I would do
Yeah.
everything. Like, I'm gonna get a whooping for that. So I'm gonna just do everything that I knew.
Yeah.
And
Right.
might as well just whoop me this one
Yeah.
time.
Right.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
do all the stuff that I need to do.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna just take the consequences later.
So
Yeah.
sometimes with our kids, right? There are times they'll do something and I'm ready to like, oh, you finna get a whooping. And then sometimes my wife might be like, babe, I want you to consider this. Let's show mercy here. Or I'll do vice versa. And growing up, I don't think I had that all the time. It might have just been like, okay, I'll do this, but we're not gonna do that. But it wasn't the word mercy that was being used with the understanding. I think on the other side, for us, right, as parents and even with our parents now, you know, there are certain holidays or certain like, you know, days of observation that we don't do. Like we don't do Easter. It's not about no bunny. This is about the work that Jesus Christ did. This is Resurrection Sunday, right? So the whole thing of getting a basket for Easter was something like, no, we're not doing that.
I ain't bought an Easter basket in 10 years.
But our parents would do it. And I think for us it was hard, like no, we gonna be just these hardcore, like, no, you can't do this and this. And I think we had to realize, like, well, you know what, wait a minute. If that's something our grandparents want, if the grandparents want to do that for them, that doesn't mean that changes or that means that we're in any way compromising what we believe. That's just something different. Now there are certain things
Well, that
like
took a lot of conversation too, though. A
Yeah,
lot
it
of
did.
tough ones.
It did,
Like,
yeah.
it got real. Like, and I don't think it was so much about the actual thing. Like, we want to get them a basket. I think it was hard for our parents to accept, like, that we were rejecting what we grew up with. That's how they perceived it.
yeah.
And so,
and this
for
was the
us-
best way of parenting, and now you're like
right.
kind of shunning away the advice that we had did.
Right.
Yeah.
And what helped, you know, because I'm the one who was the heathen and, you know, the family. And, you know, we get into these conversations that really were more like blow ups with my mom over time as I've matured and as I've remained constant in how we parent and just how we live our lives in general. We've been able to have these conversations where I would remind her, hey, like, at the end of the day, this is not about me rejecting how you raised me. That was the time and the season that the Lord had us in, and you did the best you could do. But understand, you also instilled in me to follow and serve the Lord. So
Yeah.
if he gives me wisdom about something, then really your issue is with him and his wisdom and what he's releasing to me. If you want us to be better than what we experienced as kids growing up with you guys as parents, then allow us the space to make decisions that reflect that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that was a good
So yeah, it
Just
was a good
kinda
moment where
good
we
moment,
did
yeah.
we allowed them to express their love in that matter because it was important to them. But that's still a challenge because we still don't yield or budge about Halloween. And so,
Yeah.
you know, for Easter, Resurrection Sunday, we made that concession. But yeah, there are other things where we still just hold the line and deal with the fallout.
yeah.
All right. So now we're going to just get into a couple of fun questions
Okay.
about you
Fun,
guys.
baby.
About
Yes,
you guys'
I hear it.
relationship.
Fun,
So,
Mr. Kyle.
what do you guys do for fun?
What don't we do? We love to laugh.
Yes.
From the time that we were married until now, the greatest highlight of my day and my life is to see Kyle laugh. He's always so serious and so deep. I have to introduce some silly, like on 10 into our relationship just to remind him, baby, it's okay. Like, it ain't all just so dire. But we definitely do Instagram reels. Like, we got a couple people that we follow. That's like our bedtime ritual. Like, what's funny that we could see on here. We loved at one point going downtown. Like, we grew up going to the museums, going to the shed, like doing all of that stuff with our parents.
Yeah.
So that was something that transferred over. We love listening to like the old music, like how we said we love 80s, 90s culture, like the nostalgia of that
The Dusties.
bonded us so
The
deep.
Dusties,
All
yeah.
the
But
Dusties.
those are our Dusties. This is
right.
our parents' Dusties was the
Right.
60s and the 70s.
Now
Yeah.
we dabble over there a little bit too,
Yeah.
like just the wholesomeness of that whole era of
Yeah.
being children who could play. Like at one point, I think we both recognized the smell in the air of going to school in the morning. Like we both know that smell, or like we both would talk about riding in the car with your arms in your sleeves on a summer night when your parent driving back home and they was playing what was that V103 on the radio.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
those were the moments that bonded us.
Yeah.
So that's something that we do. But yeah, I would say we bond over that. We bond over movies. Like we both big movie buffs, so we'll just go throughout the day quizzing each other, acting
DC or
out
Marvel?
whole scenes. No, everything.
Y'all watch everything, DC and Marvel?
No, I mean DC, Marvel, mystery, like old movies, new
But if
movies,
you had to pick one,
black
DC or
movies.
Marvel?
Oh, if we had to pick, I'm ambivalent. I know this is very unpopular, but I don't really rock with the comics like that. That's a tough one for me. There's so many more to like
I
in
got
Marvel.
a unique perspective for y'all. Maybe this will help you out.
Yeah.
I prefer Marvel superheroes and DC villains.
Ooh,
See, I knew
Okay.
we were brothers, and we were knit together in two different wombs, but connected in the spirit. I would say the same thing. Yeah, I think Marvel
Yeah.
has the characters are really interesting and compelling, and there's some really good storylines. I think that DC villains are way better, and I think too DC is a little bit more grounded and more practical.
yeah.
speaking.
I was about to say I really like Batman. Like I
Yeah.
love that he's a detective. I kind of like that dealing with darkness in a city and like having to maintain this identity, but underneath like you you the man. And so I like Batman, but
Yeah.
then I really do like some of Marvel's superheroes.
Yeah. So I think for us, food is another thing for my wife and I.
yeah.
Just kind of tasting things, and I think too we realized that like as another place of intimacy too. Like
Because Kyle was so vanilla
yep,
when we got
and,
married.
and my wife has definitely expanded my palate.
Now he's like a very, very nice curry.
Yeah, for sure. And like I love to cook for her. Like
Yes.
I like for us to do cooking together. Like when my wife was pregnant.
Which, if you know Kyle, that's very significant coming from somebody who was putting black pepper in oatmeal.
Yes.
Yep, another podcast.
Yeah.
We're gonna edit that out. I gotta protect my guy. We gotta
Yeah.
edit that out.
Yeah. So that being a thing,
Yeah.
we I think we really love experiencing new things together.
Yeah, that's it.
Going places and
Yeah.
doing that is big.
Yeah, I
Um,
think we kind of make our fun.
Yeah.
Like we could be chilling and it'd be fun depending on what we're doing.
Yeah.
Or we could be out and it's fun.
Absolutely.
I think our goal is
Nice.
at the end of the day to find that rest together.
yeah.
Last question. What's the biggest strength of your relationship?
Definitely the friendship, right?
The friendship, and I would say our
I mean, the Lord is a given, you know,
Right.
for me, but
yeah.
for me, that's it.
Yeah. I believe our level of resilience. Like we've gone through things,
Y'all.
but nothing but
tell
the
you.
grace of God, like, to go through something and then to be, kind of propelled back to where you were. Like that constantly being the thing. I say this to, I had this conversation with people who are single and waiting to be married, or someone who might be courting. This is one of the telltales for me, and I say this from personal experience, and I hold firm to this. Marriage, a big part of it, man, is you don't know how strong your marriage is until you go through something. And I'm not saying that you wait until you go through something, right, and then try to marry someone, and then that's when you put the effort in. But give it time, and when the storms come, is going to show you what your marriage is built on. A lot of times we want to marry people based on, and as I was saying earlier, based on the kind of person that you think. When God is putting two people together, he is in the business of investment. He's in the business of what will last until the end. He's in terms of longevity, what will bring him glory, all of those things, right?
He said, don't let no man break apart.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I brought together.
And one of the things, right, when you look at the Lord and you look at people in the Bible, when God is using someone or someone becomes a candidate that God wants to use, he's looking at longevity. Now, regardless if that person will lend themselves to it for the longevity purpose, that's entirely on them. For us and with our marriage, and what I would tell other people is, again, your marriage is only as good as it's able to endure the things that go along with the seasons of life.
Absolutely.
And so, there'll be some things, man. There'll be some things that'll shake. There'll be some things, man, that'll crack. There'll be some things that'll crumble. But is your foundation strong enough in the Lord together that you can get through that? Yeah. I did not want someone that, and I remember this was told to us on the night of our marriage. Someone came up and this was our heart. Like, when you get married, you're throwing away that key to go in that room and run away. That's gone. There is no back door. There is no plan B. And so realizing that, like, there is no other option than what we have right now. We can either stay at where we are, or we can choose to go up before the Lord and go to greater heights. Those are the options that we're dealt with. And so I would say to anyone, do not marry based on what you think is something that you need. You have to go with what God knows what you need. He says, I know the plans and purposes that I have for you to give you a hope and a future. So he's in the business of, how does this pan out in the longer run? I think sometimes when we see divorce, is I think we have people, and it's not always the time of, oh, these are two people who were married and didn't get married because they were married the wrong person. Is you weren't willing to go through the things necessary in some instances to produce a stronger volume of character. God is going to turn the fire up. He's going to shake things, right? To test that. If God will test individuals, not tempt them, but test them, how much more will he do so in a marriage? And so I think that that's always been a thing for us, is the level of resilience, the level of strengthening that's needed to go through, to come through solid on the other end.
Man.
I could say a couple things, just a couple. My encouragement would be, one, don't put God in a box, right? I think something that tripped me up was feeling like my husband was going to come a certain way, that, maybe he would be from Africa, maybe he would be from China. I know a lot of people get into that, like, God is going to send me this person and it's going to happen in this big, explosive, supernatural way. Sometimes you just fall in love. And I think that's okay.
Yeah.
That was our story. We got this old Dawson's Creek story, but it happened that way, right?
Yeah.
We weren't from other countries and we weren't married without knowing each other first. And so, I think it's unique to the couple. Like, if you're with someone right now and you decide this is the person that I want to be with, God blesses the covenant regardless. He's not going to say, I don't like that covenant. Y'all don't get nothing over here. Once you're married, you're married. But take that step. The other thing I would say is, don't subscribe to the opinions of what our culture has to say today. It's very selfishly motivated. A lot of times people do view marriage as contractual, like, I'm not going to, do this or this or this, and just kind of enter into something that's built on a slippery slope. And other times you have people say, well, I'm good. I don't need to be married. We already doing all the stuff, but we see how that's contributed to the brokenness of communities like ours. So my encouragement would be always to get married, and don't think, that it's got to happen to you a certain way in comparison to someone else. Your relationship is unique to you. God knows that and sees that. And he's he is the God that celebrates relationships, right? If you ever read Song of Solomon, he was happy that the couple had decided to be together, and so he blesses the marriage.
Yeah.
Amen. Man, this has been great. This has been so good.
Man.
This was better than what I was expecting.
Man.
I was expecting y'all to be a little shy, but y'all came through. Maybe not you, but
goodness.
Sometimes I'll be like,
More
"How am I-"
reserved.
Yeah,
He's definitely more
not
reserved.
shy, but reserved a little bit. But
Yeah.
nah, I appreciate you guys for coming
Appreciate
on
it.
Thank
here,
you
man.
guys for having
Thank you.
us.
Thank you.
Oh no, this has been a blessing. And if you watching have been blessed by this, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If people want to like get in touch with y'all, I don't know, for prayer or anything, y'all got like Instagram, Facebook. Do y'all shout those things out or?
We do. We are on Facebook. You can find us under our names, Kyle Warner, Mrs. Lavietta Warner. We're on Instagram, but very minimally. So if you reach us on Facebook, we can exchange further info there. We're happy to be called anytime. Like we live for that. Like there's, no time that we're not available to minister and to serve.
Yeah.
Dope. And so there you have it. The Warners, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate y'all for being on here, and y'all gonna be back, especially for that relationship panel that I'm planning on having.
Absolutely,
Yes.
man. Keep
before
us
the end
posted.
of the year. So, all right, it's the Weird Perspective. This is the Myths of Marriage series. My name is Derry. God bless y'all. To the next one. Peace.
Peace.
Mm-hmm.